In the vast golden deserts of North Africa during World War II, one German pilot stood out above all others, a man whose skill, style, and humanity made him both admired and controversial. His name was Joachim Marseille, and to friend and foe alike, he became known as the Star of Africa. Joachim Marseille was born on December 13, 1919, in Berlin, Germany. His father was an officer in the German army, a strict man who believed in discipline above all else. But young Hans Joachim, or Jochen as his friends called him, was the opposite. He was charming, mischievous, and a little rebellious. From an early age, he had a love for music, parties, and adventure. He wasn't the typical soldier type, and certainly not the kind of person anyone would predict to become one of the Luftwaffe's most successful fighter pilots. When he joined the Luftwaffe in 1938, he was just 19 years old, good-looking, confident, and full of attitude. But as training began, it became clear that Marseille was a natural behind the controls. He had incredible reflexes, spatial awareness, and an almost instinctive understanding of aerial combat. Still, there was a problem: discipline. Marseille clashed with authority constantly. He stayed out late, drank heavily, chased women, and often ignored orders. His commanding officers were infuriated. At one point, he nearly got kicked out of the Luftwaffe entirely. But despite all that, there was something undeniable about him. When he was in the air, he was brilliant. In August 1940, Marseille was assigned to JG-27, a fighter wing flying Messerschmitt Bf-19s. He took part in the Battle of Britain, Germany's massive air campaign to destroy the Royal Air Force. But the Battle of Britain didn't go well for him. Marseille was talented, but his style was reckless. He often broke formation, chased enemy fighters on his own, and ignored commands. While this independence would later make him legendary, during that campaign it almost got him killed, more than once. By the end of 1940, he had scored only 7 victories, and many of his superiors thought he was more trouble than he was worth. So, the Luftwaffe decided to transfer him, not to punish him but to give him a fresh start. His new assignment would change his life forever. In early 1941, Hans Joachim Marseille and his unit were sent to North Africa to join General Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. The war there was unlike anything Marseille had experienced. The sky was clear, the desert vast, and the fighting fierce. Here his flying style, fast, aggressive, and unconventional, was perfectly suited to the environment. He developed a technique that became his trademark: lightning-fast attacks, extreme maneuverability, and the ability to shoot with pinpoint accuracy from close range. Unlike many pilots who relied on spraying bullets, Marseille waited until the very last moment to fire. A single burst, right on target. His fellow pilots began to notice something extraordinary. While most Luftwaffe aces claimed a few victories every month, Marseille's tally began to rise at an astonishing rate. By the summer of 1942, Marseille had become a sensation. He was only 22 years old, yet his record was already incredible. Dozens upon dozens of confirmed aerial victories, most of them against experienced British and South African pilots flying Hurricanes and Curtiss P-40s. What set him apart wasn't just his skill, it was his personality. He treated his enemies with respect. After shooting down Allied pilots, Marseille often flew alongside their parachutes, saluting them as they descended safely. On several occasions, he even dropped messages over British airfields, giving the locations of downed pilots so rescue teams could find them. For Marseille, the air war wasn't about hate. It was about the duel, skill versus skill. He once said, "One must be honest in combat. If I ever shoot down an opponent who has no chance, I would consider it murder, not warfare." His comrades admired him, but they also found him unpredictable. When Marseille wasn't flying, he was playing the piano, singing, or joking with ground crews. He hated authority, often ignored orders, and refused to follow strict Nazi ideologies. He was German, yes, but not a Nazi. In fact, he openly mocked many of the regime's racial and political beliefs, something extremely dangerous at the time. But his reputation as a hero in the desert made him untouchable, at least for a while. Then came September 1, 1942, a day that would become legend. That morning, Marseille and his squadron took off for a routine patrol over Egypt. What happened next seemed almost unbelievable. In just 11 minutes, Marseille shot down 17 enemy aircraft all by himself. It was one of the most extraordinary feats in the entire history of aerial combat. His accuracy was so precise that many Allied pilots who fought him later said it felt like they were facing a ghost. He would appear suddenly out of nowhere, strike with impossible precision, and vanish again into the sun. By this point, Joachim Marseille had become a national hero in Germany. Even the Nazi propaganda machine celebrated him. He was awarded the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds, one of the highest military honors in the Third Reich. But privately, he was conflicted. He didn't see himself as a symbol of Nazi glory. He saw himself as a pilot doing his job. In letters to his mother, he expressed deep doubts about the war and frustration with the regime. And despite all the fame, he remained humble. When asked about his success, he said, "I am not a Superman. I am just a good shot who happens to be lucky." By mid-1942, Marseille's total victories had climbed to 158, an almost impossible number, achieved in just over a year of combat in Africa. But his relentless pace was taking its toll. He was exhausted, under immense pressure, and increasingly aware that his luck might not last forever. Then, tragedy struck. On September 30th, 1942, Marseille was leading a mission near El Alamein. His new Bf-109G2 developed an engine failure, and smoke began filling the cockpit. He tried to turn back toward base, but the situation grew worse. He was blinded by fumes and losing control. Realizing he had no choice, he ordered his men to stay clear and prepared to bail out. Marseille climbed out of the cockpit as the plane dived, but something went terribly wrong. His body hit the tail of the aircraft, killing him instantly before he could deploy his parachute. He was only 22 years old. When word reached his squadron, the men were devastated. Even hardened soldiers wept openly. His commanding officer, Eduard Neumann, later said, "Marseille was the best. There was no one like him, not before and not after." The British, too, respected him deeply. Allied pilots who had fought against him often described him as a gentleman, a worthy opponent. When they heard of his death, many expressed genuine sorrow. The Desert Air War had lost its brightest star. Joachim Marseille's final total stood at 158 confirmed victories, all but 7 achieved in North Africa. To this day, he remains one of the most successful fighter aces in history, not just because of his numbers, but because of how he fought. He was an artist in the sky, graceful, daring, and almost impossibly skilled. But more than that, he was a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, there were individuals who held on to a sense of honor and humanity. He refused to conform. He lived fast, flew brilliantly, and died young, the very image of a tragic hero. Thanks for watching. If you have a thought on Joachim Marseille, drop it in a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe.